Hey everyone, tuning in online. Thanks for stopping by to the Flutter Atlanta stream. Everybody here, thank you for braving the traffic and the cold weather. Welcome to Flutter Atlanta. I just want to remind you guys as I get started, we are using the mics in the ceiling so they pick up everything, so don't say anything that you would regret on our YouTube stream. But digging in, my name is Emmett Dean. I'm a manager of engineering here at Black Airplane. I have a background in native Android and iOS development, and I've been using Flutter for a little over 3 years. I've built over 17 Flutter apps, and we have several more in progress, and I often use it for my own personal projects. I want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane and thank them for the food, the drinks, and letting us use this awesome space. Black Airplane's a leading development agency in the Southeast, and we have a really special team here that produce top quality work, and we're capable of building pretty much anything these days. So today we're going to be talking about Firebase Crashlytics, and this might look very similar to our talk a couple months ago on Firebase Analytics or Google Analytics, and we even talked about it briefly in that talk. So this goes into a little bit more depth on how to set it up, and then also a couple tips on how I set it up specifically for my project. Let's dive in. As always, let's imagine you just launched your awesome new app, and your user base is blowing up. You've got thousands of users, all your friends are downloading it, your app is going to the absolute moon. But your app review is in really bad shape. You're getting a whole bunch of low star ratings, and you don't have any idea why. All the reviews are talking about crashes, but maybe you don't have any details on them. You don't have any kind of reporting set up other than these just normal analytics coming from Google and Apple, which for a Flutter app isn't very helpful because you have a cross-platform framework app, and these native stack traces aren't helping you at all. And in general, you would want something a little bit more in depth to be able to hunt down these bugs on your local machine and recreate them and try and release the best experience you can. So enter Firebase Crashlytics. As everything, or a lot of the products that we talk about here, Firebase Crashlytics is a part of the Firebase suite. So if you've used other Firebase projects, it's going to be really simple to set this up. It's going to be pretty much the same exact process, and it'll also play really nicely with all the other Firebase tools that you have. So if you're using a lot of Firebase things, use this because it's going to make your life really easy and also pull in your data from those other products. So it is important to note that Crashlytics only supports Android and iOS right now. This is the biggest limitation when it comes to the Flutter world, but there's another company called Sentry, which is a huge error tracking, crash reporting company who also owns codecoverage.io if you're ever running automated tests and tracking code coverage. Sentry is a great option, very similar setup, and something you should look into if you're building Flutter web apps. So keep that in mind, but because most of the products we talk about here and most Flutter users use Firebase in some sense, we're talking about Crashlytics primarily today. So first off, talk about adding Crashlytics to your Flutter project. If you remember when we talked about Google Analytics, it is very similar. So you're going to just add this as a package. But one major difference here that you have to make sure you run or don't forget is running this Flutterfire configure. If you did not use Flutterfire to set up your app initially with Firebase, then there are some manual steps that you can do here. But this step is really important for a couple of reasons. The Flutterfire configure, when you have the Crashlytics package installed, will set up a couple more things natively for you. And one of those things is at build time, it will automatically upload your DSYM files to Crashlytics. And what those files allow you to do is basically make sense of a native stack trace. So again, all of these stack traces are coming in to Android and iOS SDKs. So you need these symbols to basically unencrypt them and kind of break it back down all the way to a useful stack trace that you can understand. So if you set this up and you're getting crash reports, but they don't make any sense to you at all, it's likely you forgot to run this step. So make sure you run this step because you want to get your crash reports in Flutter language, line numbers to your exact Dart files and everything like that. After you have the basic setup, you can go ahead and generally catch normal crashes. So there's 2 crash handlers here that they recommend. The first one, of course, is just if there's a general Flutter error, and recording that as a fatal error. So this is going to be something that would normally cause your app to actually crash. And when we say crash, it's not that something is broken, it's that you have a release production app, something happens and the whole app closes. And this is the worst case scenario for an app because it's normally a repetitive thing and it gives your users a really bad user experience. So that's the first one that you want to set up and catch, and they recommend. Another one in this lower code example is to catch asynchronous errors that aren't necessarily handled by the Flutter framework. So this might be an asynchronous function that's running that's going to crash at an odd time, and this will go ahead and catch that for you and return it as well. Notice that that error might not be fatal, so we're calling a record fatal error here and then record a normal error here. It allows you to distinguish, which can help you prioritize on the Crashlytics console side. This is a great start. Now we'll know that if our app crashes, we'll get a log in Firebase. This is going to give us at least enough detail to kind of dig in, figure out where the worst parts of our app are or where the biggest crashes. And it's also going to give us some information on what percentage of our users are crash-free. But wait a second. Crashes aren't the only time something could go wrong, right? We want to know when something's going wrong at any time during our app. And in fact, if you have built your application in a fairly safe way, interacting with your APIs, likely all of these errors are being caught for you and you're showing error states. So if you did a good job in trying to avoid crashes, you could have no crashes, but still nothing's going to work in your app. So what should we do? And here's an example of that. So hopefully you're protecting yourself from most crashes. This is an interesting package that uses some functional programming concepts where in our repository, which is going to live between our data layer and our presentation layer, we'll interact with our data layer, but we'll go ahead and catch any possible errors here, and then we'll return either a failure or a success state. So if we return the failure here, it will go ahead and show a failure state in the UI that we design, and if it succeeds, obviously it'll work as intended. But this could be happening every time and we not record a fatal crash because everything's working as intended here. The only time we would be able to see it is down here where we're catching the error with this log and this return statement returning out our nice error that we're forced to handle in our presentation layer. So something that we do a lot in our projects is use this logging package. If you don't have a logging package, I recommend getting one. Get rid of those print calls all over your code base while you're debugging. And this logging package is really popular, as you can see, and it's really awesome. My favorite log they have is a WTF log. When you're really confused, you can do log.wtf, and then it'll make it really big and purple in your console as you're trying to figure it out. It also has various log levels, everything from debug, information, error logs, the WTF, the warning, and you're able to set various log levels to determine what kind of logs you want out at different times. So if you can leave these logs all over your program if you want, and then limit which are getting shown depending on what you need to see at that time. But when you use a logger like this, it gives you some extra options. And an example of that is consider extending this logger to automatically report these issues for you. So you just saw in this code example, we're calling log.e, which is the error log, and it's basically going to print out the server failure, the error itself, and then the stack trace really nicely in red in our console, and that's great. But just like we said, we wouldn't be able to see that otherwise. So if we extend this and override this error log method, we can just have it record this error to Firebase for us with all of the information so we can still keep track, hey, something went wrong here, and then just use the normal implementation after that. So this is a good example of when to use inheritance in a Flutter project, and also using this example, you could do all sorts of different things based on different log levels you're doing. So this works really well for us. If you are catching an error that is not detrimental and you don't want to see it in Crashlytics, you can always use the warning log. So they have a log.w that'll still make it pop up bright orange, and you can still, something went wrong, but it's not fatal, not even worth recording, happens all the time. So that's a good way that we use this to catch our errors that aren't necessarily fatal and give you a more accurate representation on if something's going wrong and the steps you need to fix it. Awesome. Now we have a ton of information in case something goes wrong. And handling this information now becomes fairly straightforward. So here's a quick example of what a Crashlytics console might look like. After you have enough data, it's going to give you a graph of your percentage of crash-free users over here on the left. This might be something that your management might want to look at, make sure that everybody's having a generally good time using your app. And then on the right side, you can actually see a specific number of crashes, how many users it's affecting, and then also how many non-fatal crashes. So that's going to be our non-fatal errors that are like those caught errors that we can just report here. Down here at the bottom, we have an example of a Flutter specific crash. So you can see it actually gives us a dot line number, line 11 here. So he knows that if we dig into this, this is where the error is actually being thrown. I can go to home page, line 11, and then tackle that error. So it's very human readable. It's going to be very close to exactly what you're getting running locally on your device. So you're not going to have to do anything weird to try and finagle these stack traces to be able to figure out where this error is actually happening. If this isn't enough, though, to debug your error, maybe you've been trying to recreate this error on your device for hours. You cannot, for the love of God, figure out what it is that's causing this error for a specific subset of users. You can it allows you to pass even custom keys in to keep in-depth it allows you to pass custom keys and gives you in-depth device information. So here's an example of kind of what that looks like. So up here, we have a similar crash happening that's varies differently, so it'll actually also track variants for you if it's a similar crash but maybe happening at slightly different times. You're able to get your version number of the app itself, so maybe you aren't worried about any crashes that are happening on an older version. That's fine. You can just look at a specific version. Whatever iOS version they're running, the device itself, in this case it was an iOS simulator, when exactly it happened. And then down here you can see we can access our stack trace, keys, logs, and data. Here we're looking at the keys, and these are all things that you can set up custom. So you can just, in the Crashlytics setup, basically log things like if you want to log a user ID. So you always have a user ID in here. Maybe you're trying to figure out if it's only happening for pro users, right? If only people that actually purchased your app. So you can log all their statuses of the user here to help you debug, okay, this is only happening for this subset of our users. And then it should help you recreate it on your side because you can mock a similar user and go through the flow that they were going with. Also, as a bonus, of course, all of these Firebase projects and offerings work together. Last time, or a couple months ago, we talked about Google Analytics and setting up custom events throughout your app. These can be things like, in this case, app opens or even navigation. So one that we normally set up for our apps is being able to figure out what screens did this person go to. So if you log all of your navigation events, you'll actually be able to come in and see under these logs, they went to the login screen first, and then they were on the main dashboard, and then they looked at this event, and then this crash happened. So then we'll have a really accurate representation on how to recreate this bug. We'll have all of our user information and exactly the flow they went through to cause the error. So that's pretty much it today. Do we have any questions before I go into the content calendar for next year?
You mentioned at the beginning that Crashlytics isn't supported on web yet. Do you know if that's on their roadmap or?
It is. There's an open issue. A lot of people have been pushing for it because obviously part of the Firebase suite and a whole bunch of Flutter users, almost everybody uses Firebase in some sense or the other. And they have all said it would be really great if we could just add this and it work on all the platforms that Flutter supports. So I think it is on their roadmap, but it's not a light lift, and I'm not sure exactly where the priority lies.
So let's say you deploy an app and there's a lot of crashes and there's a bad user experience, and then you use this tool to remediate all these problems that are causing the app. Do you find that you're able to recover the positive reputation of the app, or are the users so turned off that you can never get back to being in good graces with the users after you fix that? Well, how does that go?
There's a lot of methods to this now. So first off, the old-fashioned way is you release an app, it sucks, you get this feedback, you fix it, and then you launch it back out there, right? And that can take a while because you have to go through App Store review and all of these different processes, and a lot of that bad feedback is still lingering. The app stores today allow you, whenever you release a new version of your app, to either maintain your review history or clear it off. So they allow you to wipe the slate clean when you launch a new version of your app. And I think there's some limits on how often you can do that, But that being said, if a user downloads your app, has a terrible time, and then uninstalls it, getting them back is going to be really hard unless you have some sort of outside tool to hook back into their email, send them an email, say, hey, we fixed it, whatever it is. So that system would be something separate you'd have to implement. The other option is, app review can take a while. We've had it anywhere from 24 hours to a week. And if you have, 90% of your users are crashing, that's going to be really bad during that period of time. But there's a team of really well-renowned Flutter engineers working on a tool called Shorebird, which is essentially code push for Flutter. So React Native has had this for a while where you could remotely push an update to the app that's live without having to go back through app review. So that would allow you to essentially do it instantly. One tool that the app stores don't offer that I do really wish they did is an instant rollback. So as soon as somebody updates to the new version of the app that's buggy, and you find out it's buggy, you can't just push them back to the old version. You have to release a new version with the patch, or a new version that's the same as the old version but marked as a new version. So that's a little bit of a pain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Well, how does app review work? How does that procedure work? What is that?
So basically, you're going to build your entire application.
Yeah.
They won't really give you much information ahead of time. And then you're going to set up your App Store listing, all of your metadata, your pictures, everything. And you'll submit all of this to App Store review. There's probably some mixture of automated tests that happen on your app, and a real human sits down there and pulls up your app, looks at Apple guidelines, and will actually respond to you in a message, hey, this doesn't meet these guidelines, or you need to provide more information here. Apple specifically is very notorious for focusing on privacy. So if you're requesting certain access features, they will really drill you on that to make sure you do need access for it and that you're being transparent on how you're using that information. So it's a pretty rigorous process where they dig into you, which is probably the biggest pain building apps versus building for the web. But once you're through, then normally app review process is quicker if you're just doing bug fixes, small new features, stuff like that. Is there a cost associated with Crashlytics? I believe that is free. But it's free?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least I've never incurred any
So
big costs from it.
pull up pricing real quick. Yeah, Crashlytics is offered at no cost. So that is a big difference, I believe, between Sentry. I think Sentry allows you so many reports a month on a free tier, and then they charge after that. There were 2 instances of instantiating the connection to that. Crashlytics was that an either or ants. Yeah, so the this step 2 on this example, it's kind of small, but step 2 includes step 1. So this first on air recording the fatal error and then the record error. So this step includes what you've already done in step 1. Do you have a recommended please upgrade package? There are quite a few. I don't have one that I use that's on pub.dev. A lot of the time our implementation actually uses remote config and will actually show a custom upgrade. So what that allows us to do is basically set a minimum version that we want them to be on. So it won't force them to upgrade just if there's one available. It'll be, okay, is their version above this version? Then they're fine. Otherwise, it'll force them to upgrade. But yes, the point you're making, Randall, with that, it is a really good idea before you launch an app to have some sort of mechanism to force people to upgrade. Because if you do have an instance where you launch an app and it's 90% crash, you would love to be able to tell all those people to upgrade, right? You can't rely on the App Store always to just eventually update the app. People have different settings on how their apps update. Some is 100% manually, some is automatic just whenever the App Store finally gets to their device. So, what kind of report do you get about stack traces? Can you tell what's on the stack? How do you ensure that you don't accidentally see private data? With the stack trace, you're going to basically get the exact same stack trace as you would with a catch statement. So in that example that I was showing here, This catch statement, this stack trace, is going to give you all of that exact same data, the same line numbers, everything that it's hitting. When it comes to the second part of the question, can you tell what's on the stack? I think you may have to store that separately if I am understanding your question. You'll get all of the files that it went through, you'll get the stack trace, but if you need more information on what the actual state of the app is during that moment, you'll need to log those as custom keys. When it comes to seeing private data, they do a lot of this for you to block seeing private data, so things like these event summaries, right? It's not actually telling me who it is here, which is good. I would say this is more important for analytics than Crashlytics, because analytics will actually give you location data. Crashlytics will not, but you can log anything you want under these keys, but really this would be no different than catching these errors manually, storing them in Firestore. So all of the information that you could store in the keys you have access to anyway. If you're worried about employees seeing this private data, then you would need to limit who has access to these consoles and what you're trying to store. Yeah.
I got an out of scope question. Apologize up front. Have y'all, has your team ever used AWS Amplify versus Firebase?
No, but I've heard good things about it.
I wasn't sure. I looked at it, disqualified it for Firebase, and I was wanted to know if y'all had it. So thanks. Good.
I think Danielle does more with AWS, so I'm sure she's worked with that in some sense. So next time she's here, it might be worth asking her about it. What are the kind of notifications do you get to let you know you have activity in Crashlytics? I believe that may be customizable to some sense, but it will automatically send you email notifications about any trending issues. So this is going to be dramatic changes in your percentage of crash-free users. So if you're sitting around, 98% crash-free, you release a new version, and then all of a sudden that drops down to 92%. It will send you an email saying you have a trending stability issue and you need to look into it. I think there's a certain threshold after percentage of users on fresh users or on fresh issues. If a fresh issue affects a certain number of users, it'll send you an email about that as well. I believe they may even have Crashlytics triggers now for Cloud Functions as well that you can customize with. So that might be something to look into if you need very specific email reporting. They're starting to get pretty good coverage with those triggers. Awesome. Give you guys a few more moments online to have any other questions. Do you guys have anything else? Out of curiosity, are you guys using Crashlytics in your own apps? You are?
Yeah.
What do you think? Good stuff?
Very good stuff. It's helped us catch a lot of bugs that we wouldn't otherwise have caught.
Have you ever used the alternatives with Sentry or anything?
I haven't.
Okay.
But I do a couple of Flutter web projects, so I've been looking for.
Something.
You said Sentry does do.
Sentry does do web, yeah.
Is there a case where you would not install Crashlytics, where it would be inappropriate?
Only if I was using another tool. You really want something. Launching an app where you have no insights on what's happening, what in the wild in the app, is just never a good idea. Even privacy aside, you need to know if your app is working or not. So just the basic Firebase setup is going to give you a lot of information to find most of your crashes without having to add any personal information. The only reason you would ever add that kind of information if you have a specific bug that is happening to specific users and you can't figure out what setting they have compared to your other users that's causing it. Awesome. Some places use Crashlytics, others have used Quantum Metric. I haven't heard of that one.
What was that one?
Quantum Metric. Mike, is that a real tool, or are you memeing me?
Look at that. He just rickrolls you.
That would be pretty good.
That would be awesome.
This looks like a real thing. Never know with that kind of name.
It's paid.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, before we go, I do want to say we're coming up on our 2024 content calendar planning. I know we have at least 4 or 5 different people now that have reached out about doing talks, which is awesome. I would love for all of you to do talks. So I'm going to work with Brandon on getting some sort of Google form set up with all of the proposed dates for next year. And we'll basically have you guys fill out a title for your topic, describe kind of what you want to talk about, and then select any dates that will work. Once we have all of those, we'll try and organize that out, and then we'll fill in any of the gaps with other talks.
We'll make an app for it.
Yeah, we'll make an app just for that.
Please.
Can you integrate that into Flutter ATL, flutterdevelopersatl.com?
Yeah, put it. It'll never get done if we're doing that. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We will see you guys next month.
Bye.